Thanks for your company this Monday morning. This morning, more on the outcry over the latest controversial comments from broadcaster Alan Jones. If you haven't seen them or heard them, we'll play for you the original comments that were made at a young Liberal function at the University of Sydney a bit over a week ago.
Compulsive liars. And they'll lie and lie. Like every person in the caucus of the Labor Party knows that Julia Gillard's a liar. Everybody. I'll come to that in a moment. The old man must have been open years ago. Shame to think that he had a daughter and told lies every time she was in Parliament.
The broadcaster has tried to phone the Prime Minister on a couple of occasions to apologise. Her office says she won't be accepting the call, but this is part of Mr Jones' public apology yesterday.
I made comments which shouldn't have been made in the knowledge that someone may get hold of them and they may cause distress to a daughter, albeit a daughter who is a Prime Minister. And to that extent, I owe her an apology, and I hope I'll be able to make that to her, not to her through you.
Tony Abbott has said the Jones comments were out of line. The government says the opposition leader, who is close to Alan Jones, needs to go further and comprehensively condemn the comments. The Attorney-General, Nicola Roxon, was asked this morning, does she think that Tony Abbott was partly to blame?
Look, I do. I don't think Tony Abbott makes Mr Jones make these ridiculous comments, but I think if you strike a match, you then can't be surprised if the fire takes off in all sorts of different directions. For 2 years, Mr Abbott has been making outrageous comments about the Prime Minister. For all of that time, Mr Jones has been making outrageous comments. They've been on air, they've been at Liberal Party functions. This is an environment that the modern Liberal Party is breeding, and it's time to say that enough is enough.
The Attorney-General was on the Nine Network's Today Show a bit earlier. Joining me this morning on our program from Adelaide, Labor MP Nick Champion, and in Melbourne, Liberal frontbencher Senator Mitch Fifield. Gentlemen, it's good to see you both. Senator Fifield, I want to ask you, first of all, about this Jones controversy. Laurie Oakes says, well, Laurie Oakes, for one, says that Tony Abbott needs to distance himself from Alan Jones after these comments. Do you think that that's a fair assessment?
Well, let's be absolutely clear that the comments by Mr Jones were wrong and offensive, and he's apologised for those as he should. And Mr Abbott has made clear that he repudiates the comments of Mr Jones. But can I also say, Kieran, what is also wrong and offensive are the attempts by Nicola Roxon, Bob Carr and Craig Emerson to seek to blame Tony Abbott for the comments of Mr Jones. Mr Jones is not Tony Abbott. Tony Abbott is not Mr Jones. Tony Abbott does not need to apologise for comments that he himself did not make. I think it's appalling, absolutely appalling, the comments of Nicola Roxon this morning on the Today Show and also on Radio National, where she sought to blame Tony Abbott. She, Bob Carr and Craig Emerson are seeking to gain political advantage from this awful situation. If they actually cared about a grieving daughter, they would not be talking about this. We would all shut up and we would all move on.
Let's look at, I want to put up on the screen for you Malcolm Turnbull's tweet from yesterday morning. Malcolm Turnbull tweeted, Alan Jones' comments about the late John Gillard were cruel and offensive. He should apologise to the Prime Minister and her family. Senator Fifield, that line from Malcolm Turnbull is a lot stronger than what we heard from Tony Abbott, who, let's be open about it, is very close to Alan Jones. And he said simply that the comments were out of line when others, including Mr Turnbull, are describing them as cruel and offensive. You've described them as offensive yourself this morning. Does he need to at least strengthen the criticism by simply saying they're out of line? Is that enough?
Look, Tony Abbott has been crystal clear. The comments were out of line. They were wrong. He's made that point. He said that Mr Jones should apologise. Mr Jones has apologised. What we're seeing now is an attempt by the Australian Labor Party to seek to gain political advantage from an unfortunate circumstance. And can I say, Kieran, I wish that when there was a party leader who actually themselves said something that was wrong and offensive, in the form of Mark Latham, who referred to a senior journalist as a skanky hoe, I just wish that at that time Nicola Roxon had condemned him for what he said.
Let's look at another comment from Nicola Roxon now. She was asked, did the apology from Alan Jones go far enough?
Look, I don't think it was. The apology, unfortunately, is for comments that are just one now in a long line of comments that have come from Mr Jones. And any person who's lost a parent knows that this is just not a topic to make some sort of joke about. It's just lacking any common decency. And unfortunately, I think it's an environment that has been set by a very strong campaign by the Liberal Party that often crosses the line. And unfortunately, we now see people repeatedly making inappropriate comments, then apologising, thinking it's all right, and then stumping up and making the comments again. It's just really not good enough.
Let's bring in the discussion Nick Champion in Adelaide. Nick, you've heard what Senator Fifield had to say about Nicola Roxon's comments and others trying to make Tony Abbott accountable for comments that weren't made by him. Why should he be?
Well, look, leaders set the tone for their parties and more broadly for their constituencies' conduct. And I think that when you look at it, this was a Liberal Party event. It was set up by the Sydney University Liberals. It was there to raise money. And it had a frontbencher on the Susan Ley was there, and a number of Liberal Party MPs who were there. And so I think the Liberal Party does bear some responsibility for the tone of this event. And it wasn't just the speech that was offensive. Some of the auction items were offensive as well. And I think just generally, when you have the they have the main speaker of the event saying that it was an undergraduate tone, I think political parties do have to take some responsibility for that. And I think the Liberal Party could begin its sort of path to redemption by donating the money that was raised at this event to a charity. I mean, obviously it was there to raise money for their internal party mechanisms. I think that they should donate all the money that they raised at this event to some worthy charity.
But how much does someone need to be held accountable, like you're suggesting and others have said of Tony Abbott as the leader of the party, for comments made by a broadcaster who might be a friend of Tony Abbott's, but how can you be held accountable for comments made by any friend or advocate or whatever else? Where is the line drawn here?
Well, Kieran, when you're conducting official party events, you do take some care with guest speakers, and if they say remarks that are out of line with community sentiment, then your political party becomes responsible for them, and that's always been the case. It's the case for the Labor Party or the Greens or the Liberal Party or anybody else who sets up political functions in this country. And the Liberal Party want to believe that we should just let them off the hook for their conduct. And for some time now, there has been a vicious undercurrent in sort of Australian conservatism, where on one level they're all very polite and nice and decent, and then on another level they're very vicious, misogynistic, and completely out of line with community sentiment. And I think it's about time that they cleaned up their affairs.
Nicola Roxon was asked this morning whether Alan Jones should be sacked. Let's play you her response to that.
I don't think you can keep criticising women, keep making comments like this one that are just lacking in any decency. I think there's a bigger question in some ways for the Liberal Party. It was a function of theirs. Frontbenchers were at the function. They've not been seen or heard from. This is as if they are creating the environment that makes these sorts of comments okay, and then running a million miles away from it and not taking the responsibility that they should.
Well, Senator Fifield, what do you say to that? Because it was something done at a Liberal Party sanctioned event, and when it comes to the apology, we've seen similar comments made by this broadcaster before, where referring to sending the Prime Minister out to the ocean in a chaff bag, and then apologising and then making another comment, offensive comment. So does Mr Abbott, like, as I said earlier, Laurie Oakes suggested this morning, does he need to distance himself from the broadcaster?
Well, Tony Abbott has distanced himself from the comments of Mr Jones. I think that's all he needs to do. He has condemned the comments. He said that Mr Jones should apologise, and Mr Jones has apologised. I completely reject.
I'm not sure you can say he's condemned. But Senator Fifield, I don't think you can say he's condemned the comments. He said they were out of line. Now, out of line is different to condemning, I would have thought.
It's the same thing. It's the same thing. And Kieran,
Okay.
I completely reject the smear by Nicola Roxon and by Nick Champion that the Liberal Party has somehow helped create an environment in which misogynistic comments are made, that the Liberal Party is to blame for what Mr Jones said. That is deeply offensive. All the Coalition has done and sought to do since we've been in opposition is to hold a bad government to account. Hold a bad government to account that lies to the Australian people, that says they won't introduce a carbon tax and then does. Now, no amount of seeking to smear Conservative politics as somehow being misogynistic when it's not is going to shield this government from accountability. We're holding them to account because they are a bad government.
Okay, well,
and
I'll put that to...
They need to stop these outrageous allegations, trying to smear every person who supports the Liberal Party as being somehow women haters. It's garbage, it's rubbish, they've got to stop.
Yeah. I would say that you've condemned the comments, and Malcolm Turnbull, by saying they're cruel and offensive, he's condemned the comments. But saying something's out of line, I know you said it, that he's condemning it, but I think others would disagree with you on that. Does the leader need to be a bit stronger in his repudiation of the statements made? If he does condemn them, should he not make it clearer on that front?
Look, he has been strong, he has been clear. I don't know how this has become an issue about Tony Abbott. The only reason it's become an issue about Tony Abbott is because we have had Labor frontbencher after Labor frontbencher salivating, falling over themselves to get out here to take political advantage of something which is absolutely nothing to do with Mr Abbott.
Nick Champion, your response to that, given that it does seem the government's drawing clear links to Tony Abbott, Nicola Roxon saying he's partly to blame this morning for creating the environment. Now, it was a young Liberal event. Tony Abbott wasn't there. His office or the Federal Party didn't organise it.
Well, look, nothing makes me sadder than the fact that we're talking about these things on public television. I would have preferred that the Liberal Party didn't hold these events and these remarks weren't made. But when they're made, Mitch just has to accept that you're judged by the company you keep in politics, and if you go to rallies and have
if you're going to go down that track, Mark Latham.
Well, why don't we go back in history? Why don't you start talking? What did you say? Well, I wasn't even in Parliament, Mitch, when that happened.
So
but
what, member of the Labor Party? If we follow your rule,
Mitch,
that's...
But Mitch, if I was there, I would have condemned it as being unreasonable. If I was there. But we're talking about the here and now, and what you've got to accept is that your political party is holding rallies with inappropriate signs, it's holding events with inappropriate speeches, and you've just got to clean up your own act and just accept responsibility for it. Just accept responsibility for the conduct of your political party. And as I said before, you could begin by asking the Sydney Unilibs to donate the money that they made out of this fundraiser, deliberately trying to be controversial, with deliberately controversial auction items and the like. They can donate that money to a worthy charity, and that could be the beginning of your party taking responsibility for the matter.
Nick Champion, Senator Fifield makes a fair point, though, that if these comments have been made, they're not the first misogynistic or offensive comments or comments that you would find inappropriate. It's not just a Liberal Party that's been responsible. There've been a number of cases in Labor's history where similarly offensive comments have been made.
Well. If and when these comments get made, and I think there'd be a remarkably few number of them, it depends on the political party's response. And what you've got to do is disassociate yourself clearly with the event and with the remarks. And we just don't see that from the Liberal Party. What we see is this sort of defensiveness mock outrage from them. This mock outrage from them. where they try and turn the attack back. Well, I just think it's pathetic. Take responsibility for an event that your political party organised and benefited from, and just send out a message to all your party branches and the like that this sort of conduct isn't acceptable.
Senator Fifield, just finally, we've got to go to a break, but your response?
Look, the Liberal Party has condemned the comments by Mr Jones, in stark contrast to the Labor Party's reaction when Mark Latham referred to a female journalist as a skanky hoe. Nicola Roxon at that time said nothing. Nick Champion was a party member, said nothing. Bob Carr at the time said nothing. Craig Emerson at the time said nothing. We've condemned the comments. Labor should do the same when there are people, their own leader, makes such comments. Our leader hasn't said anything of the sort.
A quick break and we'll be back. Stay with us.
Another Saturday inspection. But this one's different. This is the one. When, out of nowhere, two wingbats from hell swoop to attack. Wingbats in matching boat shoes. But the arrogant jangle of European car keys doesn't faze you. You downloaded the mobile app from Domain. Everything you need is at your fingertips. Domain prepared you for victory. Unholy beasts, be gone! Unholy beasts, be gone! The award-winning mobile app from Domain. Download to dominate.
BB, BB, BB. Australia's #1 award-winning BB cream by Garnier. 5 benefits, 1 product. It's quick and perfect. It unifies, corrects, brightens, moisturises and protects from UV. Instantly flawless, healthy skin. The BB cream by Garnier. Who takes care of me?
Garnier.
And now for oily to combination skin, new Garnier BB cream oil-free for shine control and a flawless matte finish.
Garnier.
What's my city mantra? First, stay at a Mantra Hotel at the heart of things, where you can be comfortable in your surroundings. Enjoy the view. If you have to work, try and enjoy it, but make sure it's not all business. And remember what's important. That's why I stay at my City Mantra Hotel.
To those who don't think of what money can buy, but of what it can do. Who are always learning, always moving. To those we say, you belong. Diners Club.
Hi, I'm Sam Willoughby, pro BMX racer. On the track, I always say, the bumpier the better. But for my skin, I want a smooth, clean look. When my skin broke out, it just threw a whole spanner in the works. I didn't have confidence, and then my racing was being affected. I'm so glad I decided to try Proactive, because now I've found the solution to clear skin.
Get ready for smooth, clean skin with Rapid Action Proactive. It's fast and starts working day one. Sold separately, these 3 products would cost over $55, but get your 30-day 3-step system now for just $29.99 plus postage. And get 2 free gifts valued at over $40. Target your T-zone with Proactive's new dual-purpose clear purifying mask, plus hydrate and soothe with the Green Tea Moisturiser. Plus, become an active member and every 3 months receive a new cleanse, new tone and new repair.
Look guys, it's pretty simple. If you got pimples, get Proactive.
Order Proactive now and we'll even add our book of secrets for smooth, clear skin. Take control of your skin for just $29.99. Call now.
You can afford to do more in your home because of our lowest prices.
Portico Weed Killer only $14.98. Gurney Pressure Cleaner $139. Eco Deck Decking just $5.98 per linear metre. Lowest prices are just the beginning.
This is AM Agenda. Thanks for your company this morning. With me, Liberal frontbencher Senator Mitch Fifield and in Adelaide Labor MP Nick Champion. Nick, let's look at the news poll. I want to ask you about it. This Queensland Focus news poll shows that Campbell Newman's party, the LNP, holding up 60% on a 2-party basis. It's pretty much where it was at the election. So suggestions that there's been an enormous voter backlash in Queensland seem to be premature.
Well, what I think there is in Queensland is enormous community concern about the approach of the state Liberal government up there, and what they're doing is adopting the same austerity policies that have been adopted by American state governments and by European governments, and this sort of sort of job cuts and then the resulting economic turmoil that results in them does affect growth in the longer term, and it does affect sort of the economic prosperity of the community. So I wouldn't be sort of hanging my hat on one pole if I was Mr Newman. I think there's enormous community concern about the approach that they're taking. It's a very short-term, very sort of counterproductive approach which will affect growth in Queensland.
It won't change the Labor Party's approach. Senator Fifield, I wouldn't have thought, when it comes to, you know, warning about these cuts at the state level being the warm-up act, as they've described it for Tony Abbott, you would anticipate that to continue?
Oh, look, I would imagine so. The Labor Party never want to take responsibility for the mess that they leave state and federal governments in when they're voted out of office. They create the mess and then they spend their time condemning the Liberal Party, who take the difficult but necessary decisions to get finances back into order. I think Campbell Newman is making clear that he's not governing with an eye to the polls. If he was, he wouldn't be taking these difficult decisions. But people will ultimately reward a party leader who seeks to implement their commitments, which is exactly what Mr Newman is doing, in stark contrast to Julia Gillard, who lied her way through the last election and into office. But Labor never take responsibility for the mess that they leave. We come in, clean up after them, and I think ultimately the people pay on results.
This morning I want to wrap up our conversation with a story of the front page of the Financial Review, quoting a couple of key Labor reformers during the Hawke era, criticising the billion-dollar handouts to the car industry and also the legal action to keep certain documents and details secret. Nick Champion, these two gentlemen that have been quoted are scathing pretty much of the handouts. So an industry which is big in your electorate, what do you say to it? For example, Nicholas Gruen, who was an advisor to John Button in the 80s, he says we should have more respect than to be offering money to a firm, i.e. Ford, that has shown itself it doesn't particularly want to be here.
Well, look, you often get flat-earthed economists sort of pointing these things out. I don't think they bear much responsibility to the reality of the global auto industry. And what you look at when you look at the global auto industry is if you go to Germany, they give their their car industry 5 times as much as we give ours. If you go to America, they give, or Sweden, they give their auto industries 18 times as much as our auto industry. So we operate in the real world where, unfortunately, other governments give their car industries huge amounts of money, and in order to compete, both with those overseas subsidies and to compete with our high dollar, we need to support our car industry, and that support is basically a small public investment in order to secure a large private investment. And the people who sort of make these comments in the Fin Review are talking to a very small constituency who basically don't want a car industry in Australia. They happily wave it offshore, and I think we have to take that into account when we discuss their comments.
Well, let's go to Senator Fifield finally. About a minute left. Your thoughts on this, particularly in the context of those subsidies that are in place in many other motor manufacturing nations.
Look, we want a car industry. It should be supported. The Howard government had a plan for the future, which we continue to support. But we don't want to see waste. We don't want to see cash for clunkers schemes. We don't want to see the green car scheme, which was a massive waste of taxpayer money. The Productivity Commission should make sure that the Australian taxpayers get bang for their bucks, and the government should release the information that the Australian Financial Review is seeking. John Faulkner, as Special Minister of State, promised a new era of accountability that people would get what they should get under FOI. I look forward to John Faulkner's speech in the Senate condemning the government for not releasing that information.
Senator Fifield, Nick Champion, we're out of time. Good to see you. That's all for AIM Agenda. The news is next.